My name is Kobe Weisbach. I'm the Director of Development here at the National Museum of American Jewish History. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to the program this evening. Our special thanks to the American Zionist Movement and the World Zionist Organization, in partnership with the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia and Combat Anti-Semitism, for organizing this important and timely symposium. The museum is glad to serve as a host venue for this event and for others like it, and we want to continue to be a forum for discussing relevant issues facing the American Jewish community, however complicated they may be. Tonight's subject matter experts are passionate about their work and their causes, and they share common ground, and they also have diverse perspectives and priorities, as do many of us here in the audience tonight. You may hear viewpoints that differ from your own. We hope that you will, and you will listen to the different voices represented here tonight, and look forward to constructive and respectful discussion. Again, thank you to the AZM and their partners tonight, and please join me in welcoming the Honorable Abraham Gafni to the stage. Thank you, Judge Gafni.
Okay, welcome everybody. I want to thank you all for being here today and for our symposium on Anti-Zionism and Anti-Semitism. And as you heard, it's presented by the World Zionist Organization, by the American Zionist Movement in cooperation with the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia, and Combat Anti-Semitism. One just thing I'd like to note, if any of you do not have the earphones, because one of the speakers will be speaking in Hebrew, just sort of raise your hand or someone, because someone will come and get it for you, all right? So what we're here talking about today is we've all recognized that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism have been steadily on the rise in the past several years, and questioning Israel's right to exist as a safe and secure nation state has been challenged in various circles. Jews and Jewish institutions have been under attack worldwide, and the Zionist movement has been cast in a negative light, and individuals around the world have begun to paint Zionism as a discriminatory movement when it is anything but that. So we're here tonight not just to mention that there's a problem, not just to understand the scope of the problem, or even to engage in a debate amongst ourselves, as is very likely with the group we have here. The objective is to consider the various and perhaps sometimes differing perspectives in an effort to identify appropriate best practices in taking action in our communities to combat anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in all of its forms. And we're fortunate in this regard that we have many excellent speakers to discuss this, and who will stimulate, hopefully, our thoughts and discussion as they present their understanding of the connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism and how we might and should react to it. So let me tell you how the program is going to work. If you received a program, you will first note that we are going to have two speakers, very distinguished speakers, who are going to speak to us directly. Thereafter, when they are finished with that, we're going to have four speakers coming from different perspectives. Two to discuss the campus perspective, and two to discuss the local perspective. And each of them will speak briefly. Following the talks by those four, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers from the audience, and the way that is to be accomplished will be that you will write out your question on a card. They'll be brought forward to me, handed up to me, and I will address one or two or three or four of the people who would be up here at that time, and they will speak about campus perspectives, local community perspectives, and the like. They will then step down, and we will have three other speakers who will be able to discuss the issues on the national perspective, and it will be the same situation. The three of them will then speak, and after each of them has spoken, to the extent, and I hope we will have time to do that, there will be an opportunity for some of your questions written down to be sent up here and for them to comment on those. So that's the program for the evening. We try to break up the talks and the questions and the answers so that hopefully it will flow. That having been said, I don't want to say more, but I want to introduce the two speakers. I'll introduce them as they're to speak, who will be addressing us. The first is Israel Nitzan, who is the Deputy Consul General with the Consulate General of Israel. So here you go. I'll introduce the second one afterwards.
Okay. Shalom, everyone, and good evening. It is I have to say that it's a great privilege to be here with you. Also in Philadelphia, I know that our embassy hosted, as far as I know, the one event at the consulate, at the embassy. I'm sorry, and our consul general attended, and actually participated in the event in New York, and now we're here in Philadelphia, and it's a great honor being here with you. And I want to congratulate and to thank, of course, the AZM, JCRC Philadelphia, and all the other partnering organizations for hosting this important meeting. I think that as we mark 80 years to the Kristallnacht. And we will mark 75 years to the liberation of Auschwitz this upcoming January. We also mark 1 year to the horrific anti-Semitic attack in Pittsburgh, and 6 months to the attack, the deadly attack in Chabad Poway. We, as the State of Israel, will. As the Jewish state, is and will continue to be vocal, and will continue to stand up and to speak out wherever and whenever Jews are attacked around the world. I think that it's several decades, 7 decades after the Holocaust, I think that this is our moral and historic duty and responsibility. What we need today is moral clarity. We need moral clarity to ensure that anti-Semitism is not met with double standards. Anti-Semitism is as dangerous, as deadly, as insidious as other forms of hate and bigotry. And it needs to receive the same zero-tolerance response. Thank you. But we need also moral clarity when it comes to Israel, to anti-Zionism, to denying Israel's right to exist as the homeland, as the nation state of the Jewish people, denying actually only the Jewish people from the right for self-determination, as well as the delegitimizing of Israel as the state of Israel, all as forms of anti-Semitism. Now, in 2016, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, it's called IHRA, I-H-R-A. It's an organization of back then 31 nations, including Israel, the United States, and many European countries, adopted a working definition of anti-Semitism. IHRA basically provided us with a tool to define clearly what is anti-Semitic. This working definition explains when expressions of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel sentiment become a form of anti-Semitism. And of course, one can criticize certain Israeli policies, it can criticize certain decisions made by the Israeli government, but one cannot draw analogies that compare Israel to the Nazis. One cannot declare Israel as an illegitimate racist endeavor, and one cannot hold Israel to standards that no other state, no other nation in the world is being held to. And of course, one cannot hold Jews collectively as being responsible to Israeli policies and actions. The US government uses this definition, this working definition, and encourages other governments to do the same. So is Israel. Now, what we We work globally in order to encourage member states, other other governments to endorse and to act according to this working definition. But we think that also things should be done here locally. We encourage state governments to, as well as local legislators, as well as Board of Education, to endorse the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism as an important, not the only, but it is an important tool to guarantee, again, moral clarity and commitment in the fight against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So thank you very much again for inviting us to participate and to attend this conference, and I wish you all a good evening and an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Before the next introduction, I will advise you this is the time for you to put on your earphones and to get them ready, because it's my honor now to introduce the Vice Chairman of the World Zionist Organization, which is the major sponsor of this event, Yaakov Hagoel. Vice Chairman means, as you can understand, a very high position in the World Zionist Organization. So we are honored and privileged to have him here to speak with us about this topic. So, Yaakov, please.
שלום לכולם, ערב טוב. כולם עם האוזניות על האוזניים. מצוין. It's okay. Thank you. ערב טוב לכולם. אני רוצה להודות לשופט, לכבוד השופט אברהם גפני, שהוא יושב ראש ועדת הבחירות של ה-AZM, American Zionist Movement, לקראת הקונגרס הציוני הקרוב שבא אלינו לטובה באוקטובר 2020. ומי שלא יודע, אז אנחנו מתחילים בחירות בעזרת השם ב-21 בינואר ועד פורים, עד ה-11 במרץ, פה בארצות הברית. חגיגה דמוקרטית אמיתית, שכל יהודי באשר הוא, מעל גיל 18, יכול לבוא ולהצביע. הוא לא צריך אפילו לבוא, הוא יכול דרך אתר האינטרנט, דרך הסמארטפון, דרך כל אמצעי קשר אחר, להצביע ולהשפיע מה יהיה סדר היום, מה יהיה האג'נדה של העם היהודי ב5 שנים הקרובות. אני רוצה להתחיל במשהו שלא תכננתי אותו היום, אבל בדרכי לכאן שמעתי כמו כולכם בשורה מאוד טובה. ואני כיהודי מאמין רוצה להתחיל בשחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. אני רוצה להודות לכבוד הנשיא טראמפ על ההחלטה, על ההצהרה, באמצעות שליחו פומפאוס, על ההחלטה האמיצה שמחזירה אותנו אולי אפילו לימי רייגן ביחס של ארצות הברית אל יהודה ושומרון, אל השטחים ההיסטוריים, השטחים שבהם אברהם אבינו, אבותינו, צעדו בהם. אני רוצה לחזק את הנשיא טראמפ, שזה חלק מתהליך של הכרה בירושלים, העברת השגרירות לירושלים, וכמובן רמת הגולן. אז באמת יישר כוח גדול לנשיא טראמפ. אני רוצה לחזור, או להתחיל, עם הנושא שהתכנסנו אליו היום. תראו, אנחנו בעולם ב10 שנים האחרונות עוברים תקופה לא פשוטה. לא קל להיות יהודי היום בעולם. לפני 10 שנים הייתי אומר לכם את זה, הייתם אומרים לי ואמרתם לי, זה באירופה. לצערי בשנה האחרונה הבנו שזה לא רק באירופה. יש פה תופעה עולמית. האנטישמיות הייתה תמיד. היא לא הסתיימה אחרי השואה, היא לא הסתיימה אחרי הקמתה של מדינת ישראל, היא אפילו לא הסתיימה אחרי שחרורה של ירושלים. האנטישמיות הייתה כאן תמיד. אבל היום היא מרימה ראש ביתר שאת. אפשר לחשוב על הסברים, אולי בעיות כלכליות בעולם, אולי הכפר הגלובלי שאנחנו נמצאים בו, וכל ילד בכל מדינה בעולם דרך הסמארטפון שלו יכול לכתוב מסרים אנטישמיים וכל העולם רואה אותם. אני באמת לא יודע מה בדיוק התשובה. אני כן חושב שכל התשובות נכונות. אבל אנחנו צריכים להבין שהאנטישמיות זה לא בעיה של יהודים. אנטישמיות זה בעיה של העולם. אם מנהיגי העולם לא מבינים ששנאת זרים, של לשנוא את האחר, לשנוא את המיעוט, זוהי תופעה שצריך לעצור אותה או לעקור אותה מן השורש, שם הבעיה. ואנחנו צריכים להבין שהתופעה הזאת קיימת והייתה קיימת אולי מאז ומעולם. אנחנו מכירים בכתובים את האנטישמיות במגילת אסתר כבר. אנחנו מכירים עוד הרבה מאוד דוגמאות, והאנטישמיות היא כאן וקיימת. אנחנו רואים מה קורה כאן, במדינה שהיא אולי הידידה הכי טובה של ישראל, שמתייחסת ליהודים בצורה הכי שוויונית כמו כל אזרח אחר. מה קורה כאן בשנה האחרונה? ואני אומר לכם, כמי שמטפל בנושא הזה שנים רבות, על שולחני כל בוקר ישנם יותר ויותר אירועים אנטישמיים אלימים שקורים בכל העולם. עובדתית, כל שנה ישנם יותר אירועים אלימים אנטישמיים מהשנה שקדמה לה. כמו שאמרתי בדבריי לפני כן, האחריות על המצב הזה היא האחריות על כל מנהיג ומנהיג של מדינה בעולם הזה. ואם הם היו שואלים אותי מה לעשות, ולפעמים הם שואלים, צריך להתחיל בחינוך, צריך להמשיך בחקיקה, צריך להמשיך באכיפה של החוקים האלה, ואם יש צורך אז גם בהבטחה ממש. בשבת האחרונה הייתי כאן בברוקלין בשבת, ורוב בתי הכנסיות הייתה הבטחה בכניסה. אני לא זוכר את זה לפני יותר שנה אחורה. זה עצוב, אבל זו כורח המציאות כעת. מה אנחנו צריכים לעשות כעם יהודי? מה אנחנו צריכים לעשות כמנהיגים יהודים? איך אנחנו עוברים את התקופה הלא פשוטה הזאת וממשיכים להיות יהודים? כי החשש שלי והחשש שלנו בהסתדרות הציונית העולמית, שאנשים, יותר ויותר אנשים, פוחדים להיות יהודים בתפוצות. אני אספר לכם על מקומות אחרים בעולם, אבל באמת, תאמינו לי, זו תופעה שבמוקדם ומאוחר תגיע ומגיעה גם הנה. מרבית היהודים היום בבריסל בבלגיה אין להם מזוזות בפתחי הבתים, בחלק החיצוני של הבית. במקרה הטוב, המזוזה היא בחלק הפנימי, מתוך חשש. בעשור האחרון כמעט ולא תראו יהודים ברחובות פריז עם כיפות על הראשים. זה מכונה היום נוער הקסקטים בצרפת. אנשים חוששים ללכת ברחובות עם סממנים יהודים. והחשש שלנו שמי שחושש להיות יהודי, בסופו של יום, או הוא או בניו, לא יהיו יהודים. יחששו להיות יהודים. יחששו לנהוג מנהגים יהודיים. יחששו להזדהות כיהודים. אנחנו מכירים כאן תופעה בשנתיים האחרונות בקמפוסים שישנם סטודנטים סטודנטים יהודיים שנאלצים להחליף את השמות שלהם ואת שמות המשפחה שלהם ברשתות החברתיות כי הם חוששים. איפה אנחנו כיהודים, איפה אנחנו כמנהיגים יהודים, מה אנחנו צריכים לעשות? אנחנו חייבים לחזק את הזהות היהודית. אנחנו חייבים לחזק את הקשר שלנו ושל בנינו ושל נכדינו לערכים היהודיים, למנהגים היהודיים. איש איש ומנהגיו הוא. איש איש וזרמיו הוא. אני אומר לכם שאם אנחנו נחזק את הזהות היהודית, את הערכים היהודיים, את הגאווה היהודית, להרים את הראש בגאווה יהודית, רק כך נצליח לעבור את התקופה הלא פשוטה הזאת. ואני אומר את זה באמת בכאב, אני חי את העולם היהודי כישראלי. אני מגיע אל העולם היהודי מתוך ישראל, ואני רואה את השינוי שקורה בשנים האחרונות באפקט שהאנטישמיות הזאת פוגעת בקהילות שלנו. ואנחנו חייבים להרים את הראש בגאווה יהודית, ואנחנו בעזרת השם נצליח לעבור את התקופה הזאת, כי אנחנו ב2000 שנים האחרונות עברנו פוגרומים, עברנו שואה ארורה, ואנחנו נעבור בעזרת השם גם את זה. אז בואו נרים כולנו את הראש בגאווה יהודית, ונמשיך לעשות ציונות, ונמשיך לחנך את הילדים שלנו לערכים הנפלאים שלנו. תודה רבה.
Thank you so much for that. Before I just announce the next four speakers, I just want to notice that Yaakov mentioned that we have the election, and the American Zionist movement is underseeing is responsible for the election for the World Zionist Congress next year. The elections start in January. They go through March. You will see notices about it. And to the extent that you're here, and you can go for a religious stream, for a political stream, for whatever stream or group or progressive stream, right-wing, left-wing, but they're all there to be voted for. But let's show that people are really interested in the World Zionist movement, the World Zionist Congress, and the World Zionist Organization, so that each one of you does register and then vote wherever you're going to be. And believe me, you have plenty of choices, so you will take note of that. As I said to you, we're going to have four speakers up here now, and two of them are to focus on the campus perspective, and two of them on local community perspectives. We'll hear from all four of them, and quite frankly, the orders that were given to them, not by me, were to be very brief in their comments so that perhaps there'll be an opportunity for some of your questions to be answered by them if you write them out and give them to whoever's going to be walking down the aisles. So I would ask Rabbi Daniel Levitt, Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, David Dormont, and Kevin Ross to please join me up here. So as I said, we're going to start with the campus perspective, and we're going to hear First from Rabbi Daniel Levitt, who's the executive director of the Temple Hillel, and Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, the executive director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. So Rabbi Levitt, can we? No, up here. They'll take, I found that when people stand up here, people look who's speaking. Later on, we'll do the questions and answers down.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. Our speaker just before us mentioned Megillat Esther. He mentioned the Megillah, the scroll we read on the holiday of Purim. I didn't know he was going to say that, but that's also how I wanted to introduce my remarks by discussing a little bit about something that inspired me one Purim a few years ago. It was right after the cemetery in here it was vandalized, and there were bomb threats being called into JCCs. Turned out it was an Israeli kid that was calling most of them in, but we didn't know that at the time. And we had a rally here, and I was really troubled by how do you fight anti-Semitism? I went to this rally, and I felt like we're preaching to the choir, and maybe that was the point of the rally, to help support those of us who were upset about it. But it didn't feel like we were fighting anti-Semitism. And while reading the Megillah that year, I was struck by an observation. At the end of the Megillah, the Jews are given permission to defend themselves, and there's thousands of Jews and Jew supporters who go to war with thousands of the Jew haters. And there's this great big battle that ensues, and we win and we celebrate. But wouldn't it have been better if it didn't come to blows? How did it get to that point where we're having a big war, where we have to fight the anti-Semites, literally, and not just figuratively? And I think the Megillah in the beginning gives us a hint, and this is an interpretation. I'm a rabbi, I take the license to interpret a little bit. But it opens the story after giving the background of events. The first Jew we meet, and it makes a point, and in most synagogues you'll go to, everybody actually reads along this part before the person who's reading it out loud. And we say out loud, in Shushan, the capital, there was a Jew whose name was Mordechai, and they give his whole lineage. It's kind of crazy. There were thousands of Jews. We know that from the story. There wasn't just one Jew. And yet, my interpretation, and I've read other places also, was that Mordechai, the hero of the story, was the only Jew who was proud to be a Jew. You can look in Shushan and say, oh yeah, there's a Jew. And it was one person, even though there were thousands of people there. And that inspired me to recognize that I think the only way to fight anti-Semitism is to be a proud Jew. That's what they want. They want you to go away. They want you to hide your identity and not be proud. And so the way to fight it is to be proud. And when you have a lot of proud Jews that are sharing goodness with the world, literally goodness, and teaching the world, being a light unto nations, then it pushes away the darkness in an effective way that hopefully keeps people safe. And that has to happen, and it has to be, it's the long picture. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's the intro about something I want to point out on campus. On campus, the reality is similar to what you read in the newspapers. Everything that you read in the newspaper happens on a campus. But most of the time, the narrative that we experience is that that's the way it is everywhere for everyone. And it's even on the campuses that have the most amount of anti-Semitism. There's also an enormous amount of great things happening that get lost, that aren't part of the conversation. When I started at Temple 5 years ago, we were on some arbitrary list about top 10 anti-Semitic campuses. Last year, we were on another arbitrary list. We were number 14 for best campus for Jews. There's no difference, right? It's the way you look at it. Most of our students feel safe, the ones that we know about. There are a lot that we don't know about, and why don't we know about them? Some of them are afraid, no question about it. They are afraid to be identified as Jews. They don't want to be the defenders of Israel on campus. Some think they're too cool to hang out with other Jews. But there are a lot of Jews who don't know how they feel, who weren't taught enough about Israel, who are on social media in ways most people in this room aren't going to understand, that really don't, like things that we sort of hear about being, bastardized of human rights, bastardization of human rights when it gets only applied to Israel, and we're upset about it. We don't understand that people really think that Israel is the biggest human rights violator in the world. And so you have 18 to 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds who care about the world and want to make the world a better place, and they're being taught that Israel is a terrible place, and the Jewish students are learning that also. And to me, what I see as a major problem with the way the Jewish community is addressing this is we have an unbelievable amount of funds to do Israel programming. I get a call every other day for an anti-BDS speaker. I had a donor one time tell me that they won't give us money because we don't do enough to fight BDS, but we don't have BDS on our campus. What we have is an enormous amount of apathetic and ignorant Jews who don't know if they want to identify as being Jewish because they don't see any value in it. Maybe they're scared there's anti-Semitism, maybe they think it's archaic, but they're not passionate Jews. They're not living out Jewish values. Yes, last Friday I had a student in my office who wanted me to recommend him a book on Jewish values because he wants to figure out how to be Jewish. Our students have no idea. I mean, there's lots of students who have an amazing idea, but there is an overall picture where our students don't know what it means to be Jewish even, let alone how to support Israel, whether to support Israel. And having a Hillel, and it doesn't matter Hillel any campus anywhere, that has an enormous, disproportionate amount of Israel programming available to them is going to create a barrier for so many of these Jewish students who don't want to deal with Israel right now. They're never going to come in our doors. They're never going to learn about being Jewish. They're never going to go on birthright. We're never going to have hard conversations with them about Israel, about settlements and about human rights. And they're not going to be able to ask their questions so that we can give them a perspective so that they know how to respond when they see videos online or they hear somebody make a comment in class. And what's really, really important to me, to my colleagues in Hillel everywhere, is that we are able to attract the most amount of Jews to connect with our community, to feel empowered by our community, so that in the long run, they'll be proud Jews, there'll be less anti-Semitism, and also they'll learn about Israel. They'll be able to teach others about Israel. And obviously, there's a lot more to say, but my time is up.
Okay. Dr. Romirowsky. And as you arrive, remember you have those cards. If there are questions that you want to have addressed to any one of the speakers, write them out now, and you'll see people walking around. Just raise your hand, and someone will get them.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to make a few points in the time that I have just on the issue on the flip side of the points that Daniel made, which I agree with when it comes to the student body. My day job, I deal mostly with faculty. There has been a significant growth of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism within North America as it comes to faculty issues. I would argue that Israel today has become a litmus test for members of the academy at large, and this is a specific phenomenon that you see in particular in the humanities. The stem cells, where you see a lot more differences as it comes to collaboration with Israel, but for individuals in the humanities who teach this topic, Israel has become a litmus test to a point of criticizing Israel's right to exist and shuttling exactly where they, between legitimate criticism and actual anti-Semitism. In North America, and I do a lot of traveling in Europe as well, there is still an ongoing debate about whether or not anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic, and does one bleed into the other. I would agree with Yaakov's point that I think that in where we are today is that we are exactly at that cusp where they are synonymous, and basically also if you look at the IRA definition was mentioned before, I would argue that they are indeed where we are. The problem is there has been also an abuse of the academy, which I think is also something to be concerned about as it relates to a discussion about Israel and Middle East at large, that the unfortunate reality is that this has fed into the prism of BDS, is that the discussion about Israel and Middle East studies has become a black and white conversation. And anybody who dares to break the orthodoxy of that conversation is in some way, shape, or form marginalized, and people who believe in other perspectives are not always allowed to have discourse on campus. I know I was asked today, to make some tachlis comments about what needs to happen, actually what is the problem as it relates to these issues. The hijacking of the academy as it relates to anti-Semitism and I would say the discussion about Israel is not a new conversation. There has been a hijacking, I would say, since the 1960s, where there has been a buying of departments and chairs, specifically with Arab other kinds of money with the clear intention that if one buys a chair or department, one buys the politics in which the topics are being discussed. So by the time, if you kind of look at the trajectory, by the time the boycott movement in its current formulation rolls around in 2005, 2004, they've already fed into a pre-existing condition of professors and who teach based on this specific narrative. The only difference that I would argue that we see today is we're used to see 10, 20 years ago, much more conversation and discourse, a balanced conversation within Middle East, and the discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic is really hard to come by. And students are, of course, are now getting a fair dose of a one-sided information on these matters. And I would argue that what we need to be doing as far as trying to, and since we all care about the well-being of the academy, most Jews, and I would argue most Americans, their first line of defense or their first line of giving is giving back to their alma maters. If we care about the well-being of the academy, there has to be a concerted effort to actually maintain that balance. Otherwise, all you're going to see is a slow but steady trajectory where the only conversation on Israel or the Middle East at large is through the litmus test of BDS. That's part of what I'm observing today as I've traveled to many campuses. And I think that part of what we need to be doing is ensuring the fact that more graduate students, more younger PhDs are getting jobs in these positions, but also given the opportunity to where you can have a discourse on campus, which is indeed a actual conversation and not panels that are basically one-sided. Most of the people that I debate on campus start off a conversation by, I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli, but, and there goes the conversation. I would argue that there has to be a fair and honest conversation about complex issues related to the Middle East, which is a rich area we all are aware of theologically, politically, culturally, that we need to actually have the opportunity to dissect that issue. And to be honest about the Middle East and what it presents today, if you're going to discuss these issues. The unfortunate reality is that the only conversation in this complex region only becomes about the dynamic of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, notwithstanding what's going on in the region. And as a result of that, there's a hypersensitive focus to only focus on these issues and to allow this narrative to be seen as a black and white issue. We need to break that mold, and that is indeed, I think, the clear, that was supposedly, the intention of what the academy should be like. The unfortunate reality doesn't always take place. And those are the kind of things that we need to be working on to ensure that. The other part, which I think, related to resources, that was mentioned here, which again is indeed realistic, which is indeed true. The fact of the matter is that the discussion about good news from Israel, which are indeed important, and about what, the nation-state narrative, which I think is also very valuable. We need to have the majority of the conversation does focus about the historical and political reality. And so we have to find ourselves in a position where we're able to address the issues of the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic today, the Middle East at large, and of course also looking at what exactly are the issues that need to be addressed if we're going to have an honest conversation about the region at large. The fact of the matter is that if you look at the region today, the majority of the players, including Israel and its neighbors, are more concerned, not for lack of priority, about the greater destabilizing factors in the region as it relates to the rise of radical Islam, Iran, and other topics than the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic. I'm not here to say the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic is not important, but there is a disconnect between the reality projected on the majority of North American college campuses and the reality on the ground. And we have to have those kind of conversations for the benefit of our students all around. On that note, I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there is anybody who has a card or question, just raise your hand and Alicia will just collect the card from you. Okay. And there's some on this side as well, I see. Very well, thank you. Okay, and those can be, if those can be brought up to me in any event. Not that I'm not going to listen to the next two speakers, but I may want to look through them a little bit. We've spoken about the campus and the school. The next area to which we will be addressing ourselves will be the local, the community perspective. And for that, we have two speakers, David Dormont, the former treasurer of Partners for Progressive Israel, who is a board member of the American Zionist movement, and Kevin Ross, who is the president of the Philadelphia chapter of the Zionist Organization of America, and who is also a board member of the American Zionist movement. So if I can call on David first.
My daughter, Nahama, lies in her bed in Tel Aviv right now. It's 1:57 in the morning in Tel Aviv. I hope she's sleeping and not lying awake thinking about whether an Islamic Jihad missile will be coming her way tonight. 2 years ago, her Socialist Zionist summer camp in Liberty, New York, was vandalized and attacked with swastikas and death to Jews painted in the dining hall. She wound up writing her college essay on that horrible event. So anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism exists, and it is our duty to point out its darkness. I would like to address 3 steps we can take locally that I believe will combat this evil. First, we must challenge and condemn all white nationalism. Unfortunately, white nationalism has become decidedly more acceptable in the past few years. But its real and present danger to us as a Jewish people has been demonstrated at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh and the Poway Synagogue in California. White nationalists are not our friends when they condemn Muslims and immigrants and pick on anyone who they see as a minority. Remember, we were once strangers in a strange land ourselves. And while many of you may consider yourselves to be white, the white nationalists see us as something else. They see us as Jews. So we cannot tolerate white nationalism and anti-Semitism anywhere in our nation, even when that intolerance comes from the White House. We've seen the embrace of white nationalists by people who are considered leaders in the White House, and this must stop. When the president says, oh, some white nationalists are good people, we must call that out. When he describes Congressman Adam Schiff as Shifty Shift, we must identify that as a code word for Jews because everyone knows Jews are shifty. We must condemn such words as anti-Semitic. Second, we must de-link.
We hear about people in Washington not being able to talk to each other, Democrats and Republicans. I'm not asking you to talk, I'm just asking you to please be silent. There'll be opportunity for people who represent a contrary view also to speak, and I would expect that those who are contrary to that will keep silent as well. But if you're unable to listen to someone with whom you disagree, then no one will ever talk to anybody else. So I'm asking you, please listen. You don't have to agree, but you must be respectful to the person who expresses an opinion. You'll have your chance to express your opinion as well. Please.
Thank you. The second thing I believe we must do is de-link Zionism, which is the liberation movement of the Jewish people, from the actions of the government of the State of Israel. Herzl did not found the Zionist movement to oppress another group of people, but to give the Jewish people a homeland where they could live and be free. So when the Israeli government enacts laws like the nation-state law that make non-Jews second-class citizens, Zionists must speak up and condemn such actions. When the Israeli government perpetuates an apartheid-like system with one set of laws for Jews in the West Bank and a different set of laws for non-Jews, we as Zionists must speak up and condemn such actions. And when the Israeli government, excuse me, I was also interrupted, so, no. And when the Israeli government embraces anti-Semitic foreign governments, such as Hungary, because they are seen as anti-Muslim, Zionists must speak up and condemn things. We have learned that one can love America and not love its government. We must show that you can be a good Zionist and love the people of Israel and the state of Israel without having to love the government. Third, we must stop attacks on and demonization of Jews who love Israel but who reject the occupation of the West Bank. Whether it be J Street, whether
disturbing this meeting. It will be over in 2 minutes, and then maybe someone else will take the next
Someone
speaker.
should be given the opportunity to answer
You will be given the
substantiated
answer.
allegations of this gross partisanship.
Excuse me, you are talking now. The next speaker happens to be a representative of the Zionist Organization of America. Is that person going to be interrupted by people who disagree with them? Maybe now then yell at him, and that would be your solution. Folks, if that's your solution to how you're going to satisfy anything if the Jewish people can't satisfy it among themselves, then you can expect to have go after the outside world. Let's at least show that you can show a little derech to each other within the confines of this room right now.
So I submit, whether it's J Street, the New Israel Fund, or Breaking the Silence, we as a Zionist movement need to be broad enough to encompass all the Jewish people and every Zionist. Because when members of the Zionist movement attack the Jewish left, its effect is to push progressive Jews further away from support of Israel, and it helps strengthen the anti-Zionist movement. In fact, today the topic of Israel has become so radioactive in some local synagogues that many rabbis will not even discuss it with their congregation. Now, Israel is not a perfect state. It has many warts and problems, like every other nation in the world. But why can't we as a Jewish community peacefully and civilly discuss and debate what is happening in Israel, just like we discuss and debate every other topic in our lives? We criticize our family, but that doesn't mean we love them any less. Similarly, we should feel free to criticize Israel out of our love for Israel. I submit that any such criticism in the long term will strengthen Zionism, and that only by embracing our entire community here in Philadelphia can we defeat forever anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Thank you.
And now, Kevin Ross, President of the Philadelphia chapter of ZOE.
Clearly, this podium was not made for 6-foot Jews. I'll bend down a little bit. All right. You know, I had a bunch of remarks I wanted to say, and I feel like I need to say something else now. And it's very painful for me to have to speak harshly to those that I love most. I mean, the Jewish people are one people. We're all a big family. But there has been a terrible, terrible exile And for thousands of years, we've been in exile, and that exile has had a horrific effect on our Jewish identity. And what has happened, and we saw it during Hanukkah, for those that don't know, Hanukkah was a civil war. It wasn't just Jews against Greeks, which is what many people believe. It was Jews against the Greeks and those many Jews that were so Hellenized, they had so badly lost their Jewish identity that they sided with the enemies of the Jewish people and raised sword against their own people because they more identified with the enemies of the Jewish people than the Jewish people. And this is a tragedy. We have produced more unhealthy people than any other people. You don't see, to say that we're occupiers in our own homeland, it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. And I think that the topic of tonight was how do we stop anti-Semitism? And I thought of this analogy of a boat, and the boat is taking in water on many, many sides, and people are pointing out, oh my gosh, there's water coming in over there, there's water coming in on the other side, and people are grabbing pails and they're trying to bail out the water as quickly as they can, but the water is rising in the boat faster than we can pail out the water. When somebody says, wouldn't it be a smarter idea, why don't we plug the holes? And I think if we plug the holes, we can at least stop the water from coming in. We can stop the bleeding, so to speak. And in many, 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 not all, but way too many Jewish organizations that have Jewish leaders, and these are not just organizations, these are organizations with the name Jewish in it. And they don't believe our own story. And how in the world can we be in a fight? How can we be in a struggle against anti-Semitism if they don't even believe our own story? How in the world can you fight against that? There was a Jewish leader at the World Zionist Congress, which I was privileged to attend, and we saw vote after vote after vote of Jews refusing to vote against BDS resolutions. And we sat there in utter disbelief. And there was always some reason why they couldn't support it. Well, they used the word and you should use the word the, and it could be confusing, and there could be unintended consequences. And okay, maybe for one, but there was 5 or 6, and it was every single one. They don't want to stand against BDS. They don't want to punch back. And it's a longer discussion why they won't do it. But the bottom line is, if we're ever going to be successful in a struggle, we're in a fight. And the only way to defeat anti-Semitism is to win. And how do you win if you have leaders that are afraid to punch back? They don't believe our own story. We had a law which was mentioned, and I want you to just brace yourself because this law is so controversial. Israel had the audacity to say, Israel is the Jewish state. God forbid. There are Christian states, there are Muslim states, many, but there can't be one Jewish state. For some reason, that's racist. There's a problem with that. This is a reflection of how brainwashed we are. We who have been in exile for so long have absorbed so many false narratives created by our enemies that we have our own beloved Jews walking around doing devastating harm to us because they are brainwashed and they don't believe our own story. So what do? We have to insist that if you're going to be a Jewish leader, then act like a Jewish leader. If you don't believe our story, that's fine. Go someplace else. Don't come to a Zionist organization and don't claim to be a Zionist if you are afraid to stand up for Zionist values. If you say that Jews have no business being in Judea and Samaria, that is a completely alien, foreign, non-Jewish concept. So go to like the pro-PLO club or whatever. Go someplace else. And so, to conclude, not only do we have to insist that our leaders embrace Jewish values and start acting like strong, proud Jews, we also have to inoculate our children from this from happening. How do we do that? Jewish day school. We have to send our kids to Jewish day school, because if they're not getting a Jewish education, then they're just going to be absorbing the same horrible fake narratives that they're getting outside of Jewish day school. We have to get involved in Jewish outreach organizations. There's Aish Torah, there's Chabad, there's so many wonderful places to start learning about Judaism, but these are not evil people. They're just terribly misguided, and they've just absorbed a scary amount of misinformation. And so I urge everyone to please get involved with a Jewish outreach organization and learn the truth, learn our story, believe our story, and fight for our story. It's a story that everyone in this room can be so, so proud of. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know that we'll have a chance to get more questions. I have a whole bunch here, and quite frankly, maybe because you were the first speaker, Rabbi, a lot of them are going to come to you. But let me just read a question, and I would ask not just for you, but anybody else on the panel, of course, to react or respond to it. But specifically, the question was, how strong is Hillel's voice in addressing Israel Apartheid Week? Pro-BDS Professor Mark Lamont Hill, the Jewish student who was beaten up by a, quote, student for justice in Palestine persons. What's happening on that campus to deal with any or all of those issues? And after you've answered, if anybody else wants to comment, of course, you may as well.
Yeah. Just one thing I want to make sure I point out, because I don't think I got to say it in my opening remarks, but I think it's very important that we put our Israel programming strategically so that it works for our benefit, so that we are inspiring Jews to build strong Jewish identity. With Israel as a very important tool for that. We have an enormous amount of positive Israel programming. Our friend Moshe Poret just dedicated an entire Israel center in our building so that we can control the narrative and create talking points about Israel. And so there's an important role for Israel programming in the way in which we address Jews on campus, but it is very difficult for the outside world to be able to understand the strategy in what young people will listen to, what they're not going to listen to, and how do we get them through our doors. In the past 5 years, the numbers at Hillel Temple have doubled in size, both our budget and our students engaged, and our students feel safe on campus. It is a safe campus where Jewish students are developing a Jewish identity that is meaningful to them, where they are going to carry that out for the rest of their lives and build a connection with Israel. And that's what matters to our students. That's what should matter to the Jewish community, because most of the students on campus aren't aware of the incident that happened over 5 years ago where a student got punched. And there is more to that story. That student was involved in an altercation. No one deserves to get punched, but he didn't get hit walking down the street for being a Zionist. There was an interaction that happened. Mark Lamont Hill is a very unfortunate event, and I was in conversation with the president of the university the day it happened. I actually had emailed the president and the chair of the board that night to say, hey, this just happened, and you guys are going to hear from it. Most of our students were unaware because it doesn't affect their lives. It doesn't affect them on campus. I get complaints from students who have professors who say problematic things, who have professors who say anti-Semitic things, and I help counsel them on who to speak to and how to address it. I've never had somebody complain about Mark Lamont Hill's class. Doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, but it does happen on campus, and I hear about it, and that's what we want. We want them to keep it out of the classroom. And so, if I haven't heard of it going on egregiously in his classroom, when I have heard of others, I think we can assume that the overall experience on campus for students is not what you read about in the newspaper. And before deciding that you're the judge and jury about how students are experiencing anti-Semitism on campus, it's important. There was an enormous amount of research done. Yeah, it happens, and we know how to deal with it. Excuse me. We know how to deal with it, and we have people like my friend Asaf Romirowsky, who came and spoke on campus last year as a counter program to a protest that was happening on campus to show diversity in Israel, and it was moderated a panel by Dr. Romirowsky, who are handling it at the faculty level. But what we need to worry about is, are our Jewish students connecting to their Jewish identities so that they can live Jewish lives as adults when they graduate. And we're doing that in bigger numbers than we've ever done before. And I invite anybody to come by Hillel sometime, have lunch in our cafe. I'll meet with you, meet some students, hear what's going on, check out our Israel Center, and understand that there's a nuanced way that you need to talk about Israel on campus, because otherwise nobody is listening. And that's true for Jewish students, it's true for non-Jewish students. If you don't know how to speak to young people today, no one will listen. And we're worried about the long run.
Okay. Does anybody else on the panel?
Just to add one more point to Rabbi Daniel's comments, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that as it relates to the case study of the Mark Lamont Hill, I mean, putting aside Hill as an individual, what it speaks volumes is to the discourse on campus. And that was the issue that most people had with looking at the issue at large. The other issue, which I think is critical in this conversation, it relates to the fact that the unfortunate reality is today is that you cannot be Zionist and another person. So, and another issue. Let me explain that. Being supportive of progressive values, Black Lives Matter, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, whatnot. If you claim to be a Zionist, you cannot be also supporting another narrative. And so being a Zionist makes you null and void in that conversation. That's what the toxicity on campus has become. The reality is, Hill, has been saying and preaching these issues for 10 years. It's not a secret what Hill believes in. The problem is that, are there enough discourse on campus by other faculty members to discuss and address these issues? The fact of the matter is that, of course, Hill is also no expert in the field of Middle East studies, but not making comments on these issues, if you follow his Twitter account and the accusations. But the fact is there has to be actual, real discourse and conversation. And the fact is that students are, unfortunately, when they sit in a classroom setting, to challenge a faculty member is not the easiest thing to do. And they have to combat facts, or so-called facts, that are given to them, and then respond to those issues. And there's an abuse of power at times within that dynamic that needs to be addressed, but they deserve to have both sides of, again, as I mentioned before, a complex issue that requires real dissection.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is, rather than give the other two of you a chance to answer, I'm going to take the next question. I'm going to ask the two of you to address it because it may be more in your wheelhouse. And I'm going to change the word a little bit, but I'll read the question because this will probably be the last question we can get for this panel, even though I have lots of questions because we want to get to the next panel. Here's the question. The question that was written was, what actions are Zionist or other Jewish organizations taking to review teaching texts that demonize or delegitimate Israel or Jewish rights? And I would just amend it to say, what are they taking, or what should they be taking? And can I ask that of the two of you who have not spoken in response to the question?
Yeah, sure. So the ZOA does have a program to review textbooks, and this is a whole nother problem, because one of the strategies of Jew haters is propaganda. And to fill textbooks with misinformation to try and turn public sentiment against Israel, against the Jewish people, is just one of their core strategies. And so if you contact Steve Feldman at the Philadelphia ZOA office, there is a whole evaluation form about a textbook, and we need to have a reporting system that if you come across a book that you think has misinformation in it, you have to report it. Because if you don't, what happens is, we all have heard the saying that if a lie is told often enough, it eventually becomes the truth. And there are people that are walking around believing horrible things about Israel that are just flat out lies, but it's because these lies have gone unchallenged for too long. So that's one thing that is extremely important.
I think the question should be addressed possibly a different way. I'm not going to address false narratives. There are lots of things that are false out there. But one of the things that we need to do is we need to educate our youth about the full truth about Israel, the good and the bad. We try to sugarcoat it. And what happens is that kids get to Israel and they may not get the full reality, and when they see it later, when they see the destruction of housing, when they see the oppression, and they don't understand the nuance of it. My daughter who's in Israel now, look, she comes from a progressive background. And she's with people.
Okay, you're not a big help, are you? You're not a help, sir. You're a disruptor. Congratulations. Now, let me finish the statement, then we'll get on to the other speakers.
She's with people now who are going to be in the Israeli army. She has friends in the Israeli army. And that experience has helped her. It's helped round her and mature her because she's understanding that people her age are fighting and dying in Israel and what it means. And when you go down to the kibbutzim by Gaza and you see what's there, we get part of that perspective. But what we have to do is get the full perspective. It is horrible to be in those settlements in Gaza, on the Israeli side. By the way, it's also horrible to be on the other side. The settlements around Gaza, in the Gaza perimeter, those kibbutzim that are there, those moshavim, to have 15 seconds or less to try to protect your children, it's a horrible situation. But it goes both ways. And the more we educate people about everything that's going on, the truth isn't necessarily nice. But a full education will make us a stronger community because we'll understand the truth.
All right, thank you.
I answered very, very briefly. I'd like to just extend my
I have
answer.
one little 10-second question for Rabbi Levitt.
Very, very short. So, Sderot is part of Israel. So, again, are we to believe that if people are going to bombard us with rockets, that we should leave? Really? It's a bad idea. If they attack us, then we should just fold up tent and go. That is another non-Jewish idea. We're Jews. We're not afraid of anybody.
Okay.
This is our homeland. And if you try and launch missiles at us, then we're going to fight you.
Okay.
But the notion that we should it's a bad idea because they keep sending rockets, so we better just fold up and leave. I mean, it's embarrassing. This is
Okay.
embarrassing.
Okay, Rabbi Levitt, the only question that someone said, maybe you can give like 5 seconds on is, you told us about the student who came to you, and people say, what did you say? I don't want to hear everything that you told them. But what book did you recommend to the student who wanted to know about Jewish values is the question.
I had a longer conversation with him first.
No, I'm sure you did.
About the nature of Jewish values. We went through a library. I pointed out a whole lot of books. Jewish literacy from Tolushkin was always a good help. He went home with, I think it was Rabbi Art Green's 10 Jewish ideas that changed the world. But my point to him was that Jewish values, one of the most important things is learning and continuing to learn and not being able to sum it all up in one book. And you know, he promised he's going to have some more specific questions and come back to me later. Because that was my hope, is that it would be a conversation and not just one book.
Okay, fine. Thank you. And thanks to the four of you. Okay. And thank you. Okay, we were focusing to a certain extent on the community or the campus perspective. Now we're going to look to the national perspective, and we're going to have 3 speakers again, and the same situation. If you have a question or comment, send it up. I don't know how much time we'll have, but we certainly, because we've asked each of the speakers to be limited in the time they speak. Before they call them up, though, because we may run out of time, sometimes we do, I think we all ought to just acknowledge Herbert Bloch, who is the executive director of the American Zionist movement, Alicia Post from the American Zionist movement, and Jason Holtzman from the JCRC in Philadelphia, who have worked so hard to put this together. I haven't mentioned Rabbi Glazer because she's going to speak also. But so the next 3 speakers are Morton Klein, the president of the Zionist Organization of America, Rebecca Harary, the president and founder of CASEPAC, and she promised me she's going to give a word or two explaining what that is, and Rabbi David Teutsch, professor emeritus and senior consultant at the Center for Jewish Ethics and the past president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Is Morton not here? What? Here. Okay, and
I'm going to give Thank you. I just want to make one quick announcement. You'll see on the back our colleagues at the WZO. Again, I'm Herbert Bloch from the American Zionist Movement. Our partners at the WZO asked me to point out an app that everybody can enjoy, no matter what your politics are. It's called Zionet, Z-I-O-N-E-T, Zionet. It's on the App Store. They'll have information in the back. It has Zionist trivia. It has Zionist history, calendar. It can sync to your calendar and give you every Zionist event syncing to your calendar. I sync it to my iPhone, and so every day I know what happened in Zionist history. So encourage you, it's from the Department of Yaakov Hagoel. Take a look at that while our speakers are getting settled in. You don't have to go on the app right now, but you'll see it later. Zionet is the app. Thank you.
Okay. Morton, please. Morton, fine.
Thank you. Let's see. Just checking my watch. Okay, I'm going to go over a couple of issues and what can be done about them. Just really very quickly, obviously, there's no time. First of all, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. If you say Israel shouldn't exist, you hate Jews. If you say Italy shouldn't exist, you hate Italians. If you say France shouldn't exist, you hate French people. So anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. We're seeing lots of African Americans, unfortunately, attacking religious Jews in Brooklyn. I think it is very important. We demand, and we've been doing this, that African American leaders should publicly have a press conference condemning the fact that African Americans, almost overwhelmingly it's African Americans, are attacking clearly visible Jews. Muslim anti-Semitism. A major ADL study has shown that 34% of Muslims in America are anti-Semitic. 75 to 95% of Muslims in the Middle East are anti-Semitic. This is an ADL study. Imams around the country, we have videotapes of them, are stating in their mosques, this is shocking, kill Jews. Jews are Nazis. Jews are fascists. We must get rid of the filth of Jews. We must make Jerusalem and Palestine a Jewish graveyard. So we have been pleading with people at these mosques, as we all should, to fire these imams. A message should be sent. This type of sermon, vicious sermons of hatred, bigotry, and actually promoting murder should be stopped by having these people fired. Jewish people should be involved in getting these people fired. Also at campuses, Students for Justice in Palestine are involved with terrorist groups, over 100 of them. They have rallies on campuses around the country. Not every rally, but many, many rallies. Destroy Israel, throw the Jews out of America, throw the Jews off our campuses. We should be demanding these Students for Justice in Palestine that the presidents of these universities condemn SJP by name. They've refused to do it. In addition, they should not be allowed to be a part of a student group paid for by student fees. So that's what we should do with SJP. And these anti-Semites in Congress are causing a terrible problem. They're mainstreaming anti-Semitism. Rashida Tlaib of Michigan has said Israel's not an ally. We must end all monies to Israel, a racist state. She takes pictures with Jew killers like Rasmi Odeh. Ilan Omar of Minnesota says Israel's evil. Israel's hypnotized the world to support them. It's Jewish money that is the reason that people support Israel. Boycotting Israel is like boycotting the Nazis. AOC has said similar things from Queens. We should be demanding of our congressmen and women that these people should be thrown off of every committee, just like the Republicans have thrown Stephen King off of every committee for outrageous statements that he has made. And finally, one of the main reasons in our experience people support BDS and have enmity toward Israel is because of lies, propaganda lies they believe. For example, they believe there's an occupation. There's never been a country called Palestine, never any kings and queens. If it's an Arab country, which it never was, why is it a Roman name, Palestine? Israel's given away all of Gaza, 40% of Jewish Judea and Samaria. That's where 99% of the Arabs live. They're under their own rule except security. There is no occupation. One of the great lies. And President Trump today said it is legal for Jews to live and work in Judea and Samaria this very day. Settlements. There's not been a single new settlement built since '93. Not a single one. There's been building done within the boundaries of the existing communities in Judea and Samaria, not a single new settlement. Palestinian, I'm speaking, if you don't mind. With a lie. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about anything, everything. I'd like to learn from you. Palestinian state. They have turned down a state 3 times in the last 20 years, 7 times in the last 80 years. It makes it clear they're not interested in the state. It's Israel's existence. They want to support Israel within any boundaries whatsoever. We must make this clear to students and others. Jerusalem, it's mentioned 700 times Jerusalem in our Jewish holy books, not a single time in the Koran. When they controlled eastern Jerusalem, it was a slum. No Arab leader except King Hussein ever visited. They destroyed 58 shuls in eastern Jerusalem. Jerusalem is minimally of holy significance to the Arabs. And finally, apartheid. Another nonsensical term that Israel's an apartheid state. Thank you. Every Arab has the right to vote. 13 members of Knesset are Arabs. Half the surgeons in the hospital are Arabs. Large numbers of students in all the universities are Arab. They're Arab judges. An Arab judge sentenced a Jewish president of Israel to jail. So this issue of apartheid is ridiculous. Another thing we show students, and I'll end with this, if the Palestinian Authority is really serious about peace, why would they commission this emblem of their party, of the Abbas did, showing all of Israel, the kafiyah over all of it, not just over Judea and Samaria, eastern Jerusalem and Gaza, all of it with a picture of Arafat and a Kalashnikov rifle. This is not the emblem you commission if you want peace with the Jewish state. And finally, every suicide bomber who dies, the Palestinian Authority makes posters of them. This is one of them, calling them a hero and a martyr, glorifying Jew killers. We must make this clear to students and others that this is who Israel's dealing with, a vicious terrorist state that glorifies murder and pays Arabs to murder Jews. And the more Jews that any Arab murders, the higher their lifetime pension. Thank you very much.
Again, if there are any questions or cards, we'll have a few minutes, I think, for it. We're going to take it out of order. Rebecca Harary asked if she could go last, and Rabbi Teich said he would be prepared to go second, even though that wasn't the order we had.
There are many ways to tell the Jewish story. There are many legitimate ways to tell the Jewish story. I worry about the impact on young Jews when we try to tell them there's only one way to tell the Jewish story. When any group says that within the Jewish community, they're inviting polarization, they're inviting alienation, and while ignorance is a major problem among young Jews, alienation is an even bigger one. I know strong Israel supporters who are anti-Semites. And I know non-Zionist youth who are passionate, committed Jews. To make an absolute identification between Zionism, anti-Zionism, and anti-Semitism blurs for the majority of democracy-oriented, liberal, Jewish young people a set of distinctions that is critical given their values if we want to make them into Zionists today. No one should get a pass on any form of anti-Semitism, regardless of how many good things they say about Israel. And it doesn't matter if that's a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter if it's Tlaib or Trump. We have to be very careful about not applying a double standard. What is important in criticizing the left is equally important in criticizing the right. Now, we know that overwhelmingly it is the right-wing white nationalists who have been the most dangerous in the United States. That doesn't mean they're the only anti-Semites in the United States. There are plenty of other kinds as well. But we need to assure ourselves that as we look at the issue of anti-Semitism, what we look at is not precise stances on Zionism, but classical anti-Semitic tropes. When we hear that Jews control the wealth, or control the media, or are an international cabal, or a sly group of people, those are all announcements that we're dealing with anti-Semitic rhetoric, no matter who it comes from. Any attempt to equate Zionism with racism is a form of anti-Semitism as well. Our best defense is calling out every example of that kind of anti-Semitism, no matter where it comes from. And in the course of that, also to be willing to acknowledge Israel's warts, because we do not do ourselves a favor with our young people or with the people that we need to debate on college campuses and elsewhere when we pretend Israel does no wrong. If Israel did no wrong, it would not be a nation state. There's no such thing as a country that does no wrong. We can argue about exactly what constitutes occupation and annexation and what constitutes democracy, but of this I'm sure, and it's pretty much a matter of anthropological fact, that when minorities are denied freedom of movement, are denied freedom of economic development and so on, those minorities react with anger and hostility. We're in a situation where we need to figure out a way to reduce that anger and hostility, because that's the road to creating dialogue, which means recognizing the nuance on both sides, recognizing the complexity of our stories, and recognizing that we have the most to gain by truly listening to each other rather than yelling each other down. That is true in the Zionist world. It is no less true on the college campus. It's very easy to throw canards. They are aimed at us often. It doesn't help when we throw canards back. The only way that we're going to move ahead is sitting down and talking with the folks with whom we disagree and hopefully moving them to a rational, mutual understanding.
And our final direct speaker will be Rebecca Harary, who is also going to explain to us, because I was not familiar with what CASEPAC is. Very well. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We made it this far. I'm so happy that I was the last to speak tonight, but before I do want to thank the AZM for allowing all of us to be here this evening, the JCRC of Philadelphia, Judge Gafni, thank you very, very much for all of your refereeing tonight. Herbert Block and my friend Alicia Post, thank you all so, so much. Please, I want to start out by saying that we heard a lot tonight on really both sides, what you would say are both sides of the equation of what anti-Semitism is all about. So the thing is, you know, we need to start thinking about Jews as a community and Jews in unity. That's really what all of this is coming down to, as I think we have witnessed tonight. But that must be an active thing. Unity has to be an active thing, not a passive thing. All Jews, really, we all have a common bond. We all believe in our God, Hashem, and we all share a common history, right? So we're already unified as Jews. We all want the hate to stop. We all want to feel secure. We all want a future for our children. And we all want to live in peace. In America, we are, as they say, one nation under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. That all includes all Jews, right? It includes the right-wing Jews. It includes the left-wing Jews. It includes Jews with no wings at all, okay? It includes all Jews. And as Americans, we must fight for peace and security for all Jews. These American ideals, though, they come with a price. They come with sacrifice. They come with service and hard work. They come with action, and they come with speaking up. No more silence. Enough of the silence. Silence is what waters the seeds of bigotry and hate. Speaking up, action. Actions water the seeds of unity, security, peace, and a prosperous future. How many people, raise your hand, know where this came from? The quote, "All these Jews need to die." Anybody know where that quote came from? That was what the killer screamed as he shot to death 11 innocent Jews in Pittsburgh. He didn't stop and ask them, are you a right wing? Are you a left wing? Do you think anti-Semitism is the same as anti-Zionism? No, he shot them all. He didn't care. He thought all Jews need to die. Why aren't we really, really acting on this? Yes, we're praying. Yes, we're writing, we're blogging, we're crying, we're shaking our heads, we're coming together for nonprofit organizations, and we're starting to really talk about it. But we're also fighting, right? And it's just not productive. More than 80% of all Americans believe that laws are the best way to control and stamp out Jew hatred. That's where CASEPAC comes in. So CASEPAC is a PAC, a political action committee, right? That stands for Combat Anti-Semitism Everywhere, okay? That idea was born out of the idea that peace comes through action. There is an ADL statistic, a little more than 1 billion people on this earth harbor hate for Jews. The next time you're in a movie theater or a restaurant or on an airplane to another country, just think that 1 in every 7 people in that restaurant, on that airplane, in that movie theater hate you because you're a Jew. They don't know what side you're on. You're Jewish, so they hate you. Period, end of story. What are we going to do about this? Okay? It's time to pass some real laws in Congress. It's time to pass laws. We need to pass laws, and then we need to enforce those laws. Okay? We need to mandate that Jewish history education, including the Holocaust, is passed for K through 12 in all public schools throughout the country. Right now, it's just being taught in 9 schools, in 9 states. Okay, CASEPAC is going to endorse and support federal elected officials and candidates with a demonstrated history of fighting Jew hatred by introducing legislation to Congress that promotes education, that promotes tougher hate crime penalties, that promotes anti-isolationism laws, and promotes anti-BDS laws. We are bipartisan, which means that we have a goal of 20 in 2020. We're going to endorse 10 Democrat, either candidates or currently elected officials that are running again, and 10 Republicans for the same reason. Because you can't get any laws passed in Congress unless both sides vote for it, right? We all know that. So we can't stop anti-Semitism, though, until we stop the violence, and that's why these laws need to be passed. I'm married 36 years. My husband and I, thank God, we have 11 beautiful grandchildren. What kind of world am I going to leave to those kids? Okay? A world that tolerates Jew hatred? A world that's not really willing to unite and connect on the level of fear of what's happening to the Jewish people? Or am I going to leave them a world that does not do that? A world that's ready to fight back, a world that's ready to take a stand, and a world that's going to make all of us come together, find where we unite, vote on those laws, get them passed, and live by them. Laws are the first defense against violence. Then we will educate, and we will educate. Education is proven to increase tolerance, to give us back the levels of safety we deserve to live by, and levels of inclusivity we can all live together. Everybody's favorite Jew, Albert Einstein, he said the following: "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." So again, I tell you, unity is strength. Division is weakness. The strong win, the weak lose. We are losing right now. We are losing the battle. We can stand in the same room and all argue. We're losing. We're not winning. We have to find ways to come together. As Jews, we can agree to disagree on other matters, but not on the dangers of Jew hatred. I ask all of you to join me and unite as God's chosen people and take down Jew hatred together. Thank you.
Before Judge Gafni presents some questions to the panel, and we will try to finish at 8 o'clock as we planned. We'll have some questions, and then Rabbi Glazer. If you have any earbuds, I think we're still missing 8, so please pass them back or to Alicia, and we'll collect them on the way out, so we don't have to pay for them. Okay. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask one question of the three of you, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase this because I'm going to open up the question. You'll see how I open it up. And then after that, Rabbi Glazer will speak and we'll be done. The question suggests, and I'll read it to you, but I want you to broaden your responses. But the question reads, the media so often slants the news against Israel. Israel, for example, quote, Israel fired rockets into Gaza. What can we do about that? My question for you is, one, do you agree with that statement that the media slants the news against Israel generally or at all? And two, to what extent can we influence media one way or the other to give an appropriate and a fair report on Israel? So react. Can we just start at the end? And I'm going to ask because of the time each of you will be relatively, well, not relatively, really brief, okay? But is the media fair, or what should we do about the media? Brief.
No, the media is not fair. Studies have shown that the people who go into journalism are overwhelmingly liberal, and unfortunately people who are overwhelmingly liberal are generally more hostile to Israel. That is an unfortunate fact. But the things that we do is I meet with the editorial boards and I go over the types of things that I talked about today for them to understand that Israel is a liberal, human rights-loving democracy, and the Palestinian Authority pays Arabs to murder Jews, names school streets and sports teams after Jew killers, makes speeches, and their own media and the schools teach hatred of Jews. When they begin to understand this, they begin to become a little bit more sympathetic. So it's trying to get to these journalists and tell the truth to them is the best way I think we can try to change them on the margins.
Talking about the media in a totally general way is as dangerous as talking about all Jews. There are places in the media that make our hair stand on end, and there are other places in the media that give us a pretty fair shake. But one of the contexts by which we have to understand this is other places in the world where there are conflicts, whether we're talking about the horrible things Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen or the horrible things that Turkey is doing to the Kurds, don't get nearly the same amount of attention, in part because Israel is much more in the spotlight because of the degree to which it's westernized, but also because Israel is the beneficiary of a special relationship that we've carefully fostered between Israel and the United States. And when you have a special relationship, and Israel, for Christians, after all, is the Holy Land, you get more than your fair share of attention. So, yes, I agree that sometimes what is said in the press is unfortunate to say the least, in which case we do need to combat it. And I think what you said about how we go about that is one major piece of it. Writing op-eds is another. But we need to also understand that some of this is the consequence of that special relationship, and what we need to do beyond trying to change the views of the journalists who we think are unbalanced is also recognize that the bond between Israel and the United States benefits from that special relationship, and it's not likely to be fractured by a few days of bad press now and then.
So, as you all know, I have a bunch of kids and grandkids, and I will start by saying that I think a lot of us in this room already have our own minds made up of how we feel about Israel, about anti-Semitism. But for me, I have my kids who range in age from 18 to 34, and now my grandchildren are starting to ask me questions about Israel and anti-Semitism and what's going on, Mom, what's going on, Grandma. And they come to me with what they're hearing on CNN and Fox News and all the other things that are going on out there. And I say to them, you know what? Don't read it. Don't watch it. Research it. Look it up for yourself. Learn. Read. Talk to me. Talk to your father. Talk to other people. But stop letting the press and the media sway you in either direction.
One of the great joys about being a chair is that you can stand up here all the time and do all the talking, look very, very important when you don't have to do any of the work in the preparation and all the other work. And I've already thanked Herbert Block and Alicia Post and Jason Holtzman, and now I'll add the fourth person in that group who's been responsible, and that's Rabbi Batya Glazer, who is the executive director of the JCRC of Greater Philadelphia, to sum up a little bit about what maybe we should be going home with and what we should be thinking about. Rabbi.
Thank you, Judge Gafni. Kol Yisrael Arabim Zeh B'Zeh. All Israel is responsible for one another. Luckily, it doesn't say we have to like one another, but we are responsible for one another. We are committed to one another. We are committed to the people of Israel, and we're committed to the state of Israel. And everyone who has come here today to take their evening to share their views comes here committed to a Jewish democratic state that is secure and able to defend itself. And this doesn't mean we all agree, but it means we work together to support one another. And I'm very proud to be associated with the Jewish Community Relations Council, where everything we do supports the wider community and brings the community together so we can hear one another. We advocate, we educate, we engage the community for the good of the entire community. As a Jewish community, we cannot allow anti-Semitism of any kind to be normalized. And it is a priority to ensure that it doesn't. And it is a priority to ensure that we hear one another and support one another as the people of Israel. And it is important that we celebrate our strengths as a vibrant, dynamic community that is made stronger by our differences, that is made stronger when we come together understanding that we are responsible for one another. And I am very grateful that I was able to be here tonight. I was very grateful for the ability to have this conversation. The American Zionist movement, and every organization represented here tonight represents people who are passionate and committed. And we are the Jewish community. We are the Jewish people. And we have survived thousands of years because we remain committed to one another. And I am very honored that you have all come here tonight. And I thank you all. I cannot possibly recognize everyone that makes our community the vibrant, dynamic community that it is. But thank you all.
I understand that, this is a series that the American Zionist movement has been put on, and it was earlier in the week, or last week, I guess, in New York, Philadelphia, and going tomorrow to Washington. And I understand from Yaakov that in New York, they completed this meeting, this symposium, with singing of Hatikva and the Star-Spangled Banner. And I think, particularly with some of the dissension we've heard, we can't be less than New York in not doing the same. So may I ask you all please to rise, and we'll start with Hatikva and then the Star-Spangled Banner. You'll join me?
I will join you.
Alon b'levav b'nimav nefesh Yehudi homiha ufatei mizrach kadima ayin l'tzion sofiha Od lov tikvateinu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liyotam chofshi ve'artzeinu eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim, liyotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Oh, say, can you see why the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous night o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of brave. Now, thank you all. Laila Tov.